What up, what up, what up? Welcome to Bleav in Rams, presented by FanDuel. Erin Coscarelli back with you with my co-host, Super Bowl champion Rob Havenstein, our tackle. Lots to get into. It's been a busy week for Rob. It's been a busy week for the Rams. We've got the NBA Finals on. Check out FanDuel Sportsbook. Get in on the action. Of course, we know where the Rams are sitting in terms of their favorites and their odds. I almost don't even like saying it as much anymore, but they're in the one spot. That's absolutely right. Rob Havenstein, how are you doing today? You had a busy weekend. You were hanging out with some former teammates, right?
Yep. Buddy had a wedding down in San Diego, and so got to spend some time down there, see a bunch of faces I haven't seen in a while, a couple coaches I haven't seen. So it was a good time to reconnect and say hi and kind of see how things are going. And it was a great time had by all.
Yeah. Well, okay, I wouldn't be doing my journalistic duties if I didn't ask what was some of the things that were talked about. If you were with some former Rams teammates, are they feeling a little extra excited these days, Rob?
Yeah, I think everything about the Rams right now is very upbeat. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't get too much into it. Mainly we were just kind of swapping war stories about times of the past and whatnot going on. But yeah, I think the general consensus is that everyone's excited to be out there back on the field. Myles Garrett looks like is a freak, so that is confirmed on the
Yep.
Rams end of things. But yeah, no, everyone was good. There was a lot of good talk about nostalgia, kind of back in the day, and kind of going through, and so it was definitely a lively conversation. I'm sure some stories were stretched as the drinks got a little more numerous, but it was a lot of fun.
That's what I love about the Rams. They work hard, but they like to play hard too.
Oh
And
yeah.
speaking of Myles Garrett, I was at Rams HQ last week of OTAs for the Rams. We're early June. I think the guys get like 5 weeks off before then having to return. And then basically it starts all over again. We've got trading camp and Melbourne. There's a lot
Oh
to
yeah.
talk about while we sort of inch towards closer to the season. Obviously, a lot of hype. But before we get into some of the things spoken at OTAs, we heard from Coach, we heard from Kobie Turner, we heard from Ty Simpson. We had Wendy on, Ryan Wendell, your offensive line coach, and the feedback and the engagement about what the offensive line coach had to say was so well received by fans. It was such a great interview and such a great conversation to get time with him. We know how busy he is. He wasn't going to do it unless, of course, you were there. What resonated for you with what Coach Wendy had to say?
Yeah, having been with Wendy for a couple years, a lot of the stuff I could have probably told you his answer before it was answered, but that's because he speaks what's true on his heart. It wasn't like there's any kind of jargon or anything going on, but I thought some of the most interesting things that he kind of brought up was usually when we get to kind of the other side of football that's like not on the
Mm,
field about what he's like the traits that he's looking for in an offensive lineman because it's that'd be a fun question to ask, all 32 head offensive line coaches, because I'm sure you'll get 32 different answers, but all kind of in the same arena. And the fact that he went physical toughness,
mhm.
which, everyone talks about, it's talked about from the combine, and I remember one guy when I got drafted. They called him, old beef jerky, and that was a positive thing. So he's just a physically tough guy, and so that's just always one that stuck with me. But I thought more importantly, he talked about that mental toughness, and just because it kind of gets glossed over, and not a lot of people know how to really put that into an offensive lineman or like what that actually looks like. And so hearing his thoughts on that about how to handle different situations, how to handle the business of the NFL,
Mhm.
obviously we just had a couple of big business deals just go down with AJ Brown and Myles Garrett. And so kind of how that affects certain people involved in the trade, friends of the trade,
Mhm.
teams, everything like that. And so having that mental toughness and that mental fortitude of kind of what Wendy talked about, I thought was the most interesting point by far.
Yeah. I mean, and he had such great answers across the board, whether it came to like you said, he loved the number one thing that he felt was the best compliment was if the offensive line guy was willing to put himself literally in front of a bus
Hmm.
to protect Matthew Stafford, and he would give you that compliment. And he said that to him. That's one of the biggest compliments. I think that's such a great point that you said. If you interviewed or asked all 32 offensive line head coaches, their answers would probably be varying, but really at the core of what I'm hearing you say and what it seemed like Wendy really valued was sure, but once you get to a certain, you could be a physical athlete, all the traits in terms of physical, but do you have like the mental toughness
Hmm.
and are you funny? Because
That's right.
all offensive line guys are funny and smart because of what they probably had to go through when they were young, which is so it's such it
Hmm.
to me again it really it speaks to the character building of what the Rams are trying to create inside their facility, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, offensive line is one of the most thankless positions out there. Obviously, there's some great
Mm,
fans who, kind of give us the flowers when it's due, and then first to get the blame. But that's just part of the job. I mean, we play every snap with our back to the ball. When Matthew has it or he hands it
mm,
off, we have an idea of where it's going, but we don't ever see it. So there's a lot of trust in there. And so when he talks about throwing yourself in front of a bus, if you've ever had, like I mentioned before, if you've ever had to block a guy like Dexter Lawrence, sometimes it feels like you're actually being thrown in front of a bus with some of these guys. So, but that's the job. That's what it requires. That's what you need to do, and you're doing all of it while you're facing the other
mhm,
way. So you have to have trusting guys. They need to be able to trust you. So you almost have to develop a certain sense of humor because you could give up a sack and all of a sudden you don't realize that maybe something else happened, snap got bobbled, or act of God came down and happened, and all of a sudden you're getting tacked on for one of our only stats that we get is sacks and holdings. Most of our stats are not good. So they're
yeah,
people talk about pancake blocks or this and that, but it's like it's not a nationally recognized stat. So the only stats we can get are bad. So you do need to have a little bit of a sense of humor just to kind of let that stuff fall off, and then you go back to that mental toughness that Wendy was talking about of being secure enough in yourself as a man, as a player, as a teammate,
mhm,
and be
mhm.
able to move forward the right way. So you have to develop a certain sense of humor. Plus, you do spend a lot of time with what 12 to 14 guys. So it's makes it the day go a little easier when jokes are interrupting some good old football talk.
I heard you were kind of a jokester on the team. Is
A little
that
bit,
true? Yeah,
yeah, a
yeah, a
little
little
bit.
bit. Yeah.
Kind of as you got older, I was there since the beginning of the Sean's inception of his playbook, so I've seen all the different iterations of things like that. And actually, to me, this weekend that was kind of the fun part of being like, all right, what's different? Like Sean had time. He had an off season. Like things are changing. I don't know what, but something is going to change because Sean has time, and that's just what coaches do. So it's kind of funny to kind of talk shop a little bit and kind of act like I'm back in the meeting room and be like, all right, what's different? What are we calling this? What's this? What's that? So that was probably the most interesting thing for me, just to, so I can get my little fix of offensive line football that I'm lacking here.
Yeah. What's different? I mean, there's going to be that's what I'm going to get into, but
Hmm.
first before we kind of get into some of the news and notes of what was discussed at today's OTAs. By the way, how it's so awesome we get Rob Havenstein's perspective. Thankless job. The only stats in terms of an offensive line are really the ones that are not necessarily good. But here's a stat
Very
I
bad.
do need to correct because I
Yep.
said it last week and I immediately I had it written two different times, and I'm going to own up to it and be accountable as a Sean McVay podium would want for his players. But I said that the Rams offensive line unit allowed the fifth fewest sacks. It's number one, guys, tied with the Broncos. I can't even believe that came out of my mouth. The Rams needed their flowers and their recognition, and I was so upset it came out wrong. So, anyways, so sorry to Coach Wendy. The Rams allowed the fewest sacks in the NFL in 2025, and keeping Stafford upright, numero uno, most important. So I apologize for that, guys. But yeah, I think the thing that was really interesting at OTAs, a handful of things. So first
Hmm.
of all, Myles Garrett was there, and he was practicing, and working with the Rams linebacker unit. My question
Hmm.
to you is, and this was actually asked to Chris Shula, the Rams defensive coordinator, if adding a premier 4-3 end changes the way he thinks about the defense structurally. Can you kind of help us unpack when you get a Myles Garrett and you implement a talent like that? I mean, that's a great question. Does the defense structurally change, or how do you foresee that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's kind of one I've been wrestling with. And I kind of, I was so excited about the Myles Garrett trade. I kind of didn't think about, what kind of defense he was actually coming from. But, just for
Mhm.
for you guys at home and kind of maybe don't understand the difference of like a 3-4 and a 4-3. The Rams have primarily ran a 3-4 defense, meaning the two guys on the outside, the two outside backers, the defensive ends, they're just standing up basically, but they're outside backers. Their hand is usually off the ground, so they're doing everything from what they call a 2-point stance. So they don't have their hand in the ground. It's different mechanics. They're being asked different things to do in defense of like what their actual rules and everything are. But when you're going to a 4-3 defense, you've got your 4D linemen out front, and the two guys on the end are usually have their hand in the ground. So he's used to coming out of a 3-point stance or a 4-point, depending on the guy, and all of his power is being expressed that way. But when you bring in a premier guy, you probably have to start mixing up a little bit of both. I'm sure it does change a little bit of the structure, especially if like, hey, the experiment comes in and you're like, hey, Myles, we want you to stand up the whole game, and he just doesn't feel comfortable with it. This early on because he's had his hand in the ground for so long. Then that's probably a conversation that happens between him and his outside linebackers coach Joe Caniglio, and then over to Chris Shula, and then over to Sean, and then I'm sure they're going to find a happy marriage about what fits best for the 2026 Rams, because historically what the Rams have done, like Wendy said, it really doesn't matter because this team right now, in his words, has done nothing. So they're still not in a, I don't want to say building phase, but they're still building the
Mm,
2026 Rams. So nothing's set in stone right now. They had an idea of what they wanted to do, but that was before the team changed. And
yeah.
in my years in the past, especially early in training camp, you get a lot of questions about how does a team carry momentum into the next year? And I always thought, I was like, man, that's almost impossible because it's a different team. There's different coaches, there's different players. Guys are at different stages of their lives. Things may hurt a little bit more, a little bit less. Things change, and so bringing over that momentum from season to season is tough. And so the start of the 2026 Rams look different with a Jared Verse out there than it probably will look like
Mhm.
with a Myles Garrett out there, just for comfortability of positional aspects.
It's so fascinating, right? Because we think, oh, Myles Garrett, he's such a stud, but it's
Hmm.
also the implementation of uh, how a defensive structurally would look and what is
Hmm.
advantageous for him, the individual, but then also what benefits the team as a whole. I guess again, like you said, what new wrinkles are we going to see? They've been doing nonstop new kind of innovation techniques, if you will. One of the things to switch gears to go to the offense and uh, talk about what was different, at least last year, and maybe what we'll see even more so different. New offensive coordinator Neil Shieldhouse. It's Shieldhouse, right? There's
Yep,
so many
Nate.
different ways. Yes,
Yep,
okay.
Nate Fieldhouse.
Nate Shieldhouse, yeah. And he was asked about, obviously the addition of now you have a guy like Kliff Kingsbury and the way Kliff has in the past as an offensive coordinator when he was there in Washington, they had more sort of no huddle air raid type packages. How do you see the sort of combination of a Nate Scheelhaase and a Kliff Kingsbury kind of replacing Mike LaFleur, who went to Arizona. How do you see that sort of envisioning when it comes to the offense this season?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the first thing that people should realize that with the Rams offense is that even though there's an offensive coordinator, there's still Sean McVay at the helm. So this offense is Sean McVay's baby. He's been doing it since 27 or yeah, 2017, sorry. And so it's evolved, and obviously it's not just Sean. He's not just a dictator down. He's super great with bringing in guys and bouncing ideas off of, and I'm sure there's a level of control that a Nate Scheelhaase will have, that a Kliff Kingsbury will have, but it's all needs to run in cooperation with a Sean McVay. And so, back in 2017, 2018, especially in 2018 when we were rolling, we did a lot of no huddle stuff. It was play calls at the line of scrimmage. Half the time we're standing there at the line of scrimmage, and then we'd have to look back, and Jared would be telling us to huddle up, and we'd be like, "Why? We can just you call the play, we'll just go do it." But there is definitely that aspect in a Sean McVay offense. I would be very interested to see with how they complement that with what I'm pretty sure is going to stick around in that 12 and 13 personnel.
Mm,
They obviously found a ton of success with it later in the season, and so
yep.
I'd be interested to see how going fast out of 12 and 13 personnel could. I mean, it could put a lot of stress on defenses, especially early in the downs, and they're in base defense. And so, for those at home, base defense basically means they got bigger people on the field. Maybe you don't run as fast. But if you get to third down, and then all of a sudden, before they can sub their big people out to go faster people, they just go fast. And so now they're stuck. And now you have a true linebacker on a matchup with a Max Clare or a Terrence Ferguson, where it's like, all right, we can bet on our guys to win. This wasn't talked about at all. This is just me going on a tangent here. But the idea of him going fast and having Kliff, who's used to going fast, it's already been in Sean's system. And so I'd be very interested to see kind of if that starts kind of poking its head back around with the already complement of what they've had success with in the past of, hey, we're going to huddle call things and just kind of get into the right play.
Yeah, I mean, and that, I'm glad you mentioned the 12 and 13 personnel because that was what they did. That was different
Mhm.
when you guys went to, I want to say it was, you were in Baltimore. Puka had an injury. I think it was Baltimore. And then you
Yep.
guys go to London, right? So then sort of you have all these tight ends. You're missing Puka. That's kind of where we started to see this tight end evolution that Sean McVay began to roll out. And again, just to kind of shed light on the trends of what Sean McVay and the Rams do and how the rest of the NFL is paying attention. I want to say 22 tight ends were drafted
Mhm.
in this year's draft, right? So there's clearly something about this system, and now you have the mind of a guy like Kliff Kingsbury, like wow. And then you bring in a Myles Garrett, a Trent McDuffie, and I have to talk about this. I don't know if you heard, Rob, but we spoke with Kobie Turner, Quentin Lake, Ty Simpson, of course, the rookie, but with those two defensive guys, why would we not ask about Aaron Donald?
Mhm.
And they all gave a great like diplomatic response because no one wants to speak for Aaron Donald. Everyone would love to have him back.
Mhm.
But when it comes to thinking really conceptualizing the fact that an Aaron Donald who's, defensive player, and then now you stack him with another guy, how does could the defense look? And would he, I mean, do you really think he could possibly come back, Aaron Donald? He's been away for 2 seasons.
I know, but Aaron's such a special guy and such a special athlete, and just first ballot Hall of Famer, Mount Rushmore of D linemen, if not the best. I think he's the best, but that's me personally. Could he do it? Yes, I do believe so. I don't believe in my heart of hearts, just purely my opinion, that he is coming back early in the season by any means possible. Now, the Rams rip off a couple, they're 11-1, 12-2, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
the playoffs start looming, and maybe it looks like a first round bye, or things start kind of going the right way for the Rams. If he's serious, I'm sure there's going to be some talks, and as we learned, the Rams can be quite sneaky about keeping certain talks under wraps. But if he wants to, I would assume that it would happen later in the year. For to be out of the game for 2 years, even if you're an Aaron Donald, to come back and for a training camp, I mean, for him, I'd be like, why? That would be tough. I'm sure his lovely wife would have a couple things to say about that, and his kids love seeing him around. But if it came something to, hey, I'll give you 2 games as a warm up before the playoffs, or a game or some, probably two. If that's something that he wants to do, I would see something potentially happening then. But like I said, when he retired, and he gave his speech saying, hey, I'm full, I'm satisfied. I walked away from the game in such a good place. I don't have the drive to play anymore. Like,
Mhm.
that's a
Mhm.
hard fire to ignite again, because the way he did it was 100%. He was all in, and so if that's going to happen, then he needs to be all in again. Just knowing the way he prepares, but man, it's a fun conversation to
I
have, and I do hope that it happens later in the year, just so we can
Yeah.
see 99 trot out there again, because man, that guy he's a special human being. He's an even better football player. Him and Myles Garrett on the same defense. I mean, Aaron, are you kidding me? How fun would that be?
I mean, just the conversations of that, like, I don't, the defense and what those guys would share and Kobie Turner, of course, we asked him, you know, getting to play with Aaron Donald, and then now how does a Myles Garrett potentially elevate his game? When you play with greatness or you work with
Mhm.
greatness, you just become by osmosis a better version of yourself. And Kobie reflected on that today, and it was a great conversation to have with him, because even through the lens of someone who he loved, Jared Verse, he really talked about how much he cared about Jared Verse and how hard it is to let a guy like him go, while at the same time being excited and amped about what you're going to be able to learn from a guy like Myles Garrett. I mean, I was walking in today's facility from like the media to your cafeteria, and Myles Garrett's just sitting on those couches, just chilling. He's so nice. I'm like, oh my god, you're like a scary terror on defense, and he's
Right.
just chilling, like, waiting in the lobby of the Rams facility. And it's like one of the things Kobie and Quentin Lake were talking about today was, don't take moments like this. The thing that McVay always says to you guys is be present. Don't take moments like
Yep.
these for granted. And I actually had that moment as a Rams, someone from LA, and getting to cover this team, getting to work with someone like you. I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be this already feels like such a special year. And it feels like that in the Rams facility. Everyone just kind of has, like, we're very lucky to be here, all of us together and finding a way to make it work.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, 100% of the way. That's Sean's culture it's just so good, because it just breeds everyone to kind of be themselves. And I think the
Mhm.
the term he uses, like you said, being present, it really lets you enjoy the day, and then worry about tomorrow, look forward to tomorrow, and like really enjoy whatever it is you're doing today. Sometimes
Mm,
what you're doing may not be enjoyable, in which case the day will end, and maybe
yeah.
tomorrow's going to be enjoyable, and it's just a better way to go through life. So you guys probably didn't think you were getting life lessons, but around Rams Nation, it all of it's life lessons, because football is life and life is football.
And there's so many lessons to glean from winning and losing. And like you said, just turn the page. You can't fix if you had a
Mhm.
bad show, you can't go back, like improve on it and get better. And it's fun to talk about. And as someone from LA and not having an NFL team for the large part of my youth experience as a sports fan, the conversation around Aaron Donald, and I asked this to Kobie, just ignites a young fan base to kind
Mhm.
of get reintroduced to a team that hadn't been here since before 2016. So just for the sake of just even causing like more anticipation about football season, whether Aaron Donald comes back or not, it's a fun thing to get men, women, young kids, just fans of sports in general, excited about LA and their sports culture. So I'm going to keep talking about
As
it.
you should. No, it's exciting. It's very exciting. That was especially when we moved the team from St. Louis over to LA in 2016. Like there was a void of all those years of those young kids kind of growing up, and
Mhm.
obviously you still had them, but it wasn't out in droves by any means. And then all of a sudden, every year as you were driving to the games, you saw a couple more 99 jerseys, a
Mm,
couple more Matthew Stafford jerseys, some Todd Gurley jerseys popping up, on some of the younger generations. And LA is such a great sports town. And, to see Rams jerseys out and about in the wild and walking around. And I was down in Disneyland just yesterday, actually. And, I saw some random Rams apparel out there. And just to see that out and about in the wild, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's growing. It's going to continue to grow. The Rams are going to do great things. And I think there's
mhm.
going to be a lot of people watching.
Yeah, and it's not just about what they do on the football field. That's what I also appreciate as, someone who grew up in LA, and the community is so important to me. They take that impact. Molly Higgins runs your guys'
Mhm.
community impact. They take it so seriously, and to me, those are also just as valuable of the stories being told outside of the Rams facility. Not just what they're doing, which is
Right.
incredible and remarkable in the stadium. When you go to Disneyland, let me ask you this before I know we're gonna close. Um, do people just like do they just like watch you? You're 6'8". I mean, do they recognize you? Do they come up to you, or do you largely sort of blend in?
I stick out, but I blend in largely. So the
Good
good thing
answer.
about football is you're wearing one of these behind me, so
Yep.
they don't actually quite know what your face looks like. It was actually just a couple people with in full Rams regalia that had come up and said, "Are you Rob Havenstein?" In which case, hey, how you doing? Took a picture and
Yeah.
all that. But most of the time, I get the usual tall guy answer, and any person over 6'4" is probably going to get this, where you'll just hear little comments as you're walking by, and just walking by, and you kind of get like a little double take, and something's coming, like you know, a
Yeah.
couple holy S's or holy F's, and you're like, "That's the biggest guy I've ever seen," and
Yeah.
something like that. And you kind of just keep on laughing and keep on moving. But
Yeah.
the good thing is I do blend in as much as I can, standing at 6'8".
Yeah, largely blending in. I don't know if
Mhm.
that makes sense, but it does for you, I suppose. I love that you say hi to the fans, and the fans,
Of
um,
course.
although maybe a little intimidated by you, he is a very friendly person. I will say
Thank
that
you.
about Rob Havenstein. We love getting to chat with you. We're so grateful. I mean, I think even just shedding light on what perhaps fans just don't know, that we can't see, that you have this
Mhm.
unique perspective. It's so cool, and we're so excited. I know you have a busy week coming up, so we're gonna let you go. But guys, please subscribe, rate, review. We're also responding to comments on YouTube. So both
Please
Rob and I.
do.
Yeah, please get in. Let us know what you want to hear, or any cool guests you'd love to have us try to request, because I feel like, when you have a Rob Havenstein, you can ask for anybody at this point. Thanks, guys. Rob, good luck this week, and appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it.